Thank you guys for having me. And one quick correction, that is not my book. I don't know who the author is, but it's not me. Sorry about that. No, that's okay. I mean, I would love to take credit for it, but I've got a couple of books, but I don't think they'd be in the archives. So, quick icebreaker. Who can tell me the name of the beer in Smokey and the Bandit that they were trying to get back east of the Mississippi? Coors Original, the banquet beer, yeah. I'd like to think that maybe that's what started my journey into beer. It's a bunch of cool guys in that movie. So again, my name is Jason Wilson. I'm the founder of Back 40 Beer Company. We are the oldest and largest producer and packager of alcohol in the state of Alabama. We distribute our products throughout the southeast United States: Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, Arkansas. We export beer to China and Canada and Mexico and Malaysia and Holland and Thailand, which is really interesting. I just got back about 7 months ago from spending 14 days in Beijing and Shanghai selling beer made in Alabama. That was a really interesting experience. It would have been enough being a relatively tall guy with facial hair in China, but the fact that I was walking around selling beer made it even more interesting. So I won't spend too much time on my resume, but I do want you guys to know who you're talking to. So I am the founder again. I graduated from Auburn University in 2005. I am a 10th generation Alabamian. I am a 5th generation Gadsdenian. I was born and raised in Gadsden, went to school at Auburn. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. I went to work for Georgia Pacific after graduating from Auburn. I worked as a logistics and supply chain analyst for Georgia Pacific for about 7 years before I really felt the pull of craft beer. And I'll get into a little bit the story behind our name, Back 40, and how that played into the state of the Alabama brewing industry at the time, and how those all kind of coincide with each other. But you can see I was named, fortunate enough to be named the first ever Young Entrepreneur of the Year at Auburn University in 2015. I've received awards from the last 3 governors, and for those of y'all who are thinking I'm a little overdressed for the occasion, I had this hat on in all 3 of those award ceremonies too. Up until about 12 months ago, I was the president of the Alabama Brewers Guild, which started out as a 1 brewery organization and is now up to 53 licensed members of the Brewers Guild. We represent the brewing industry's interest here in Montgomery and also in Washington. We have been primarily responsible for the transformation in the craft brewing industry here in Alabama over the last decade, and we did that through 7 sweeping pieces of legislation over the last 10 years that have really changed the industry in Alabama and opened up the doors for a lot of economic development and job creation here in the state. You can see some of the accolades. We started our brewery in 2009. We have a 27,000 square foot facility in Gadsden, in a historic downtown Gadsden. We're one of the 400 largest breweries in the country out of almost 8,000 now. When I started Back 40, there were 450 breweries in the United States. Now we have almost 8,000. You can see some of the things. We've been recognized at the Great American Beer Festival for some of our beer. We were the first brewery in Alabama ever to win a medal at the Great American Beer Festival, so that was a big deal. That kind of put us on the map about 10 years ago, and it led to 27 distribution contracts with Budweiser wholesalers throughout the Southeast. And yes, for those of you wondering, it is a little awkward to have Budweiser distribute a craft beer. It's not very common, but we make it work. I tell people the breadcrumbs that you get being inside of a Budweiser distribution house is better than dinner at most other places. So we take it. So you can see some of the national recognitions that we've received. Garden & Gun named us one of the 50 best foods in the South, although it's a beverage. A lot of people do refer to beer as liquid bread, so I'll take it. Time Magazine put us in their centennial review of beers in America. Men's Journal recently named our Truck Stop Honey one of the 50 best beers in the United States. You can see we work closely with several industries throughout Alabama on some marketing and advertising campaigns. This one here on the right, with the Power to the Craft, was a program we did with Alabama Power Company, just talking about all of the impact that the power company has had helping get all of these small manufacturers off the ground. So that was a lot of fun. Here's a lineup of our beers. You can see we have some fun names: Naked Pig, Pale Ale, Truck Stop Honey, Freckle Belly. You'll Snapper Biscuit. How many know that Snapper Biscuit's another term for the starfish in the Gulf? So you'll see a theme here. All of these names, I am a sucker for a double entendre. So all of these names have a couple of different meanings. And the first one, the one that's probably the most controversial, was our flagship beer, Truck Stop Honey. I originally named the beer Truck Stop Honey because the apiary that we were working with in Mobile to buy all of our raw Alabama wildflower honey from, he primarily sold his honey at truck stops and gas stations on the shelf. And so I said, we'll call it Truck Stop Honey. And it wasn't until the graphic designers got a hold of the packaging that it said, one of them came to me. We work with a great firm out of Athens, Alabama, called Mind Volt. They've won graphic design awards all over the world. And Chad Botcher, their founder and principal, came to me and said, Jason, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but you do understand in the Deep South there's a totally different definition for the term truck stop honey. And I said, just roll with it. I love it. And so now you'll see every one of our names have some reference to the Southern culture that inspired us. And I'll get, again, a little bit more into the name of Back 40 and what it means to us and what it meant to this industry, when we started. But our most recent beer release, which we're really excited about, that's doing really well in the market right now, is the Bamimosa. This is a unique product that is unlike anything you've ever had. It's essentially a mimosa in a beer can, and we're really excited about it. So you can find that at most local public stores and several local independent retailers and bars and restaurants around town. During the wintertime, our most popular beer is Peanut Butter Porter. It's just what it sounds like. It's a porter beer that tastes like peanut butter. And it tastes like peanut butter because we put a lot of peanut butter in it. Now, a lot of people ask me initially, instantly when they see that can design, did you guys get permission from Jif to do that? And the short answer is yes, we did. The only thing they asked us to do afterwards was, it used to be blue on the sides, which of course is creamy Jif. Green is crunchy. So the Smuckers family, who owns Jif, sent us a letter after we launched the product and said, we really love it, but if you don't mind, could you change the label to the green, because that's our second best-selling product, and we don't want to mess with the creamy. And I said, so we agreed to do that. This is a really simple diagram of how the beer process works. Pretty simple, a couple of moving parts to it. But essentially what you have are the four main ingredients of any beer: water, malt, yeast, and hops. In the beer world, we use malt, which is actually barley that has been germinated and then kiln dried and roasted. So if any alcohol starts with a starch source, with the exception of a couple. Wine, grapes are lucky. They already have that fermentable sugar in there, so you don't have to do anything to them but add the yeast. Sugar cane is another exception. That is a fermentable sugar. So if you ever have a rum, a light or a dark rum, that came from sugar cane. But other than that, every other form of alcohol in the world has to start with a starch, and then you can convert that starch into a fermentable sugar. In the beer world, we use barley. If you're having a sake from Japan, rice, of course, is the starch source. If you're having a vodka from Russia, potatoes, of course, are the starch source. If you're having a glass of good old Jack Daniel's corn whiskey, corn is the starch source. So every alcohol production process starts with taking a starch, grinding it up, steeping it in hot water to release all of that starch and convert it into a simple sugar. Then you add some yeast. Now with distilling, you make the beer first, and then you come back and you distill it off, and you just pull the alcohol out, and everything else, all the beer stays behind. But For beer, that's the finished product. So again, you'll see us mash the grain in, you'll see it steep in a kettle, then you'll see us ferment that beer. Depending on the beer style, there are 86 different varieties of beer in the world, recognized varieties of beer, believe it or not. And when I say variety, I don't mean Bud Light, Miller Lite, Coors Light, okay? I mean styles of beer. So there's, depending on the different styles of beer, it can take up to 45 days for that fermentation process to work, but as a general rule, when you're dealing with ales, which is what you see most breweries in America producing, you're talking about anywhere from 11 to 15 days for that beer to ferment. So this is the real world example of what I just showed you. So each one of these tanks that you see hold 2,000 gallons of product, so that's roughly 750 cases of beer, or 25,000 individual cans, 22,000 roughly. So we have, at any given time, we have about 600,000 cans of beer in fermentation. We flip these tanks every 14 days, so we'll try to produce somewhere just shy of 11 million cans of beer out of our Gadsden facility this year. And again, those are distributed throughout the Southeast into a few remote parts of the world. And keep hitting the wrong button. Here's some of the partners we've worked with over the years in Alabama and continue to work with. We do a lot of private label beers for different entities around the state. Some of these names you'll obviously recognize: Dreamland Barbecue, Talladega Super Speedway, Lulu's at the beach, and that relationship has really grown. You know, that started out with her in Orange Beach only there, and now she has a beautiful restaurant in Destin, and they carry our products there and the private label beer that we make for her. And they just opened a facility in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We provide all the beer, private label beer for that location too. The Back Porch in Destin, that's a little bit of a homer for us because one of our investors is also an investor at the Back Porch, so we kind of got that under the table. Russell Lands at Lake Martin, we make an R Ale. Again, a double entendre. He said, "Jason, we want our own beer." And I said, "What do you want to call it?" He said, "I don't know, but it's going to be RL." And I said, "Okay, well, we're going to call it Our Ale," because, you know, with that southern draw, it works perfectly. And then, of course, our most recent relationship, we are the official craft beer of the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail. Some of you guys may have noticed a couple of slides back, the Cart Barn Light. That is the beer that we make for the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail, and it's on all the beverage carts out there. Obviously, the closest thing to the back 40, which is an old agricultural term that we could find on a golf course, was the cart barn, where they keep all the carts. So that's I started to pitch the idea. The original name was Swing Oil, but they decided that they liked Cart Barn better. But now I'll talk to you a little bit about, and I promise I'm going to get out of this slideshow about my company and we'll really start talking about beer in Alabama. But I do want to give you guys a lesson that I learned on failure. And I speak a lot to young individuals at colleges. I speak a lot in different parts of the Southeast, and I always talk about failure and how we have to overcome, especially as entrepreneurs, our fear of failure. You know, your whole life you're told to avoid failure at all costs. And in a small business, in an innovative industry, you have to be comfortable with failure. Failure is not only inevitable, it's necessary. You have to fail to succeed. We've all probably heard some version of the old saying about Thomas Edison. You know, I didn't invent the light bulb. I just eliminated 999 ways not to invent the light bulb, and there was only one left. So it wasn't a process of innovation, it was a process of elimination. Lots of failures that led to that. And so we preach that a lot in my facility, and my staff knows that if they're not failing every day, they're not doing what I'm asking them to do. You know, I want them to fail every day. And that comes from my childhood. I grew up in a household with my dad who every day when I sat down at the dinner table, he said, "What'd you fail at today?" And I would have to tell him something that I did wrong, and we would talk about it and talk about what I learned from it. And that was every day of my life until I was 20 years old almost. And so I've tried to impart that in my staff. And what I tell them is, while I do encourage you to fail, there is a right way and a wrong way to fail. And my mantra is fail fast, fail cheap. Know when you're in a bad situation and get out of it, but don't ever be afraid to fail. And one of the greatest stories I love to tell about this, Tony Robbins, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins, and he always tells a story about Ted Williams, the baseball player. Ted Williams is in the Hall of Fame, widely considered the greatest swinger of the baseball bat ever. And he's got a lifetime batting average of a little bit over 300. Well, what that means is 7 out of 10 times he got up there to do what he was paid to do, he failed. You only got to get it right 3 out of 10 times, and you're in the Hall of Fame as the best there ever was. So that's my entrepreneurial philosophy. If you can get it right 3 out of 10 times. And what you see here is a beer vinegar, which is an example of our failures. We had a batch of beer. It doesn't happen very often. And yes, it's a sad day at the brewery when we discover that one of our beers is contaminated with some sort of natural bacteria that got into the brewery because somebody left a loading dock door open and some wild yeast made it into the facility or something. And so we were going to have to dump a batch of beer. And I told my staff, I said, look, we are going to find a way to recoup some value from this product before we dump 2,000 gallons of beer down the drain. I want you guys, I don't care if you rent a dunk tank and we raise money for charity, whatever, we're going to figure it out. And I bit my lip on that because they did rent a dunk tank, and I was the one that got dunked in bad beer. But we raised a couple of $1,000 for the United Way, so it was a good day. But the other half of the beer, one of our brewmasters came in and said, Jason, I love to make vinegar at home. I make wine vinegar, I make apple cider vinegar, I make all these different types of vinegar, and I'd really love to try to take some of this beer and make a malt vinegar, or what we call a beer vinegar. And I said, okay, great, that's a great idea. And so he took home about 25 gallons of it, and he made his beer vinegar concoction, and he brought it back, and I thought it was pretty good. So of course, being in the food and beverage industry in Alabama for a decade, I've made some really good relationships with some really, really talented chefs all around the Southeast. And so I bottled up a few of them and sent them out to my chef buddies and said, hey guys, what do y'all think about this vinegar? Enjoy it. And so next thing I know, I start getting feedback from these guys going, man, this stuff's amazing. It's so rich and robust. It's so much better than the house recipe beer vinegar I can get from Cisco Foods or US Foods or whatever. And they said, we want to order some of this. And I said, well, no. It was just a gift, man. We don't make it. It was just a gift. And so about a month after that, I get a call from Southern Living magazine to tell us that we had won the best new food product in the South award for our beer vinegar. And I said, we don't make this stuff. Don't print that. And they just printed it anyway. Well, about a month after that, we get a call from Garden and Gun magazine, and they say, congratulations, we're listing you guys in the new encyclopedia of Southern cuisine under V for vinegar. And I said, don't do that. We don't make this stuff. And then Whole Foods called and said, we want to carry this beer vinegar in our stores in Alabama. And I said, well, there's one problem. We don't make this. And they said, well, what would it cost if you did make it? And off the cuff, I said, $100 a case. They said, we'll take 500 cases of it. To put that in perspective, I sell a case of my beer to a Budweiser wholesaler for $20 a case. So this is a great example of failure, okay? Today we sell a few thousand cases of beer vinegar throughout the Southeast, and we ship it to chefs in New York and Chicago and LA in small batches, and that is all from a failure. The other thing that came out of that failure was our friends at Nestle called. And we are actually the only certified beer supplier for Nestle in the world. And the reason that is because most brewers are exempt from food safety standards because we're producing alcohol, which is a natural sterilizing agent. So our breweries are really sterile anyway because we've got so much alcohol in there, but we're exempt. Well, in order to work with Nestle, you have to be a food grade certified facility. Well, we are the only brewery in a several state region that actually went through the trouble years ago of becoming a food grade certified facility, even though we didn't have to, just because I'm a big fan of continuous improvement and lean manufacturing, and we're always trying to get better and improve our facility. And so they said, look, according to the list here, you guys are the only ones anywhere around that can sell this stuff to us. And I said, well, we've got an old batch of beer back here. I can send that to you if you want to tinker around with it, and then we'll go from there. And so we sent them a batch of the truck stop honey that we weren't going to send to the market, and they came back and said, okay, we've come up with a new product. It's beer glazed meatballs for our Stouffer's brand, and we're going to use truck stop honey in the label. And so this is the product. Today, you can go to Walmart or Publix or any major retailer here in the Southeast, and if you go down the frozen food aisle section over there by the lasagna and everything else, you can pick up a frozen box of beer glazed meatballs made with truck stop honey. Again, another great example of failure. So now that we talked about that, we can get into the history of Alabama beer. So there's a little bit of a debate. Not surprisingly, the historians were all drunk. But somewhere around 1897 is where everybody kind of agrees that's where we got started. There were some few, I imagine plenty of examples of non-licensed brewing operations in Alabama well before that. But from what we know, that's when the first actual license was given out, 1897. And that was to the Alabama Brewing Company in Birmingham. They grew very large, very quickly. In fact, many historians said that it looked like a brewery that belonged in Chicago or Philadelphia or Pittsburgh because of its size and grandeur. And of course, Alabama, being the proactive state that we are, beat everybody to the punch on Prohibition by about 15 years. We went dry in 1907. Wasn't until 1923, I think, that the Prohibition was enacted. And the reason that is because of a little thing called the temperance movement. Anybody remember the temperance movement stories? It was essentially women throughout the Southeast of faith who were sick and tired of their husbands disappearing for 3 or 4 days at a time, or coming home and beating them up, or having to bail them out of jail. And so they went and stood on the courthouse steps and forced their husbands to vote the place dry so nobody could drink anymore. Now, keep in mind, we've come a long way. In 1907, the average education of an Alabama man was about the 6th grade, and they were all drinking bathtub gin that was made from God knows what and God knows where. So we've come a long way. Not the same social issues with alcohol that we had back then, but that's why we went dry. So of course we went dry, and that had some pretty profound economic impact on the state of Alabama. Not only did the dozen or so breweries that were producing in Alabama have to close up shop, but we also missed out on one very, very big spirits manufacturer as a result of that move. Little known story, there were 2 gentlemen who actually lived in Gadsden and had started a distillery called the Coosa River Distillery, making Coosa River corn whiskey using the, quote, Lincoln County process. That should set some people off if you know your spirits history. Of course, in 1907, they had to shut that distillery down. One moved to Chicago to try to start another distillery because they had not gone dry yet. And the other one went to work for his uncle just across the state line in a little town of Lynchburg, Tennessee. That man's name was Jack Daniels. Lem Motlow, 6 months after arriving in Lynchburg, Tennessee, the fabled story of Jack Daniels getting mad because he couldn't open the safe, and he kicks the safe, gangrene sets in, and in 6 weeks he's dead. And he gives the entire operation to his nephew, Lem Motlow. To this day, they just changed it about a year ago, but for about 70 years after that, if you saw a bottle of Jack Daniels, it said Jack Daniels whiskey, Lem Motlow, proprietor. And it's very smart because after Prohibition was over and Lem Motlow started the distillery back up, he actually changed the name of the distillery to Jack Daniels Distillery, Lem Motlow, proprietor, Inc. So the reason he did that is because the TTB and the ABC boards in different states require you to put the full name of the brewery or distillery on every package. So it was his way of ensuring that his name would be on every bottle of Jack Daniels for the next 75 years. And it wasn't until they were bought out by an agency about 2 years ago that they actually changed that. But Lem had been quoted many times as saying he loved Gadsden and he loved Alabama, and if it had not been for the temperance movement, when his uncle died, he would have relocated Jack Daniels to Gadsden, but he didn't have that opportunity. So You can see kind of the journey that we go on. This is the history of breweries in America. And I apologize. I felt like maybe this would come through a little better. It's kind of a thin line. But you can see over here we start in 1873. We've got almost 4,000 breweries in America. There was a brewery. Now keep in mind, in 1873, the population of the United States was maybe 15, 16 million. Okay, so we had 4,000 breweries. There was literally a brewery in every town in America, multiple breweries in every town in America, and it was a major part of the revenue sources for the United States. Up until Prohibition, and this figure always shocks people, up until Prohibition, of course, we didn't have income taxes prior to that. 88% of all federal revenues came from an alcohol tax of some sort. It was either the tax on the actual product or a tax on the license to open a brewery or a pub or a bar that served alcohol. 88% of all federal money came from alcohol taxes. So you can imagine there's the reason why it took almost 15 years after everybody started screaming about Prohibition before it actually went into effect. We had to figure out how to replace all that money. Well, we were about to make the one thing that generated all the revenues for the state or for the federal government illegal. So in their infinite wisdom, Congress came up with a little concept called income tax. And so we all got to pay income taxes. Then, of course, several years later, with the repeal of Prohibition, they didn't bother repealing the income tax. You know, they put all the alcohol taxes back in place, but they kept that income tax too. So you can see this is the moment in time where we went through Prohibition. No other developed nation in the world has dealt with an anomaly in a business, specifically in the beer business, like the United States did. And it's been a great study on how it has the economic impact that decisions like this can have. And I think it's pretty apparent what it is. For some 80 years after Prohibition was repealed, we still, up until about 1987, we had less than 50 breweries in the entire United States. And that was because the reason that Bud and Miller and Pabst gained so much popularity during this time and was able to suppress the industry is because one very important thing happened in the middle of Prohibition. Bud, Pabst, Schlitz, all these guys back in the day, they were able to stay alive during Prohibition by producing sodas and root beers. And of course, you can still get alcohol in America. You just had to have a prescription from your doctor to get it. So Budweiser still made a little bit of beer. They just sold it through the pharmacies. And so they were able to stay alive by doing these creative sodas and root beers and ginger ales and things like that. But the most important thing that happened during Prohibition that really changed the future of beer in America for a long time was the invention of the refrigerated rail car. So once refrigeration was invented, excuse me, once refrigeration was invented in about 1922, I believe, now we repeal Prohibition, and all these breweries that are sitting there ready to go, they got their canning lines fired up, they got all their equipment greased up, it's ready to go. They turned the switch on and could use the rail car to get their beer all over America. So it successfully suppressed the emergence of local beer after Prohibition. You look at any other major developed nation in the world, like Germany, obviously, Britain, some of these places that are well known for beer. There's still a brewery on every corner in every town in these communities. And America would have been no different had it not been for Prohibition and the lasting impacts of some of those innovations that happened during Prohibition. So again, you can see we went from just in the last 5 years, we've gone from 2,000 microbreweries to almost 5,000. So about 800 a year is what we're averaging. We're up to 8,000 now. We've got another 2,300 breweries still in the planning stages that are scheduled to open in the U.S. And this is important to understand. Over 7,000 of those breweries produce less than 1,000 barrels of beer. So you'll see down here, actually I may have cut it off. A U.S. beer barrel, which is an actual unit of measure, this is the way we pay our taxes, is 31 U.S. gallons. Okay, 31 gallons is a beer barrel. So 7,000 of the 8,000 breweries in America produce less than 1,000 gallons. So less than 1,000 barrels. So less than 31,000 gallons of beer. That is not a lot of beer. Okay, and the reason is because they're not interested in packaging this beer and selling it to Walmart or Publix or Kroger or Winn-Dixie. That's not their business model. They want to run a small tap room, a small space where you can come in, try the beer right there from the wall, and that's it. That's the only way you can get it. It's right there. And that's the way most pubs operate and have operated traditionally. So we're seeing this explosion in breweries, but they're all very, very small breweries, and it's very sustainable. We could have as many as 25,000 breweries in the next 10 years in America. So that's pretty exciting stuff. This is a general overview of the U.S. beer market. You can see overall beer in the United States is about $114 billion a year. It's the third largest segment of the U.S. economy. Craft beer, for those of y'all who are wondering what craft beer is, it just means we don't use preservatives or adjuncts or shelf stabilizers. It's an all-natural product that we produce in a very traditional format. We're not cutting corners to increase efficiencies or volumes or economies of scale. So craft brewers represent about $27.6 billion of that industry. To put this in perspective, when I started, craft beer represented about 2.6% of the market share in America. Today it's 13.2%. So we've come a long way, and you can see even as the overall beer market is declining, craft beer still continues to grow. And again, I think that's a lot of that has to do with the local nature of a small business aspect of craft breweries. A lot of people, especially in the Deep South, love to support their local businesses. And that's something that's really driven the industry here in Alabama, is that intense support for local entrepreneurs that we enjoy here in the Southeast. You know, Alabama has the lowest business failure rate of any state in the United States. We have the most successful rate of business in the U.S., and we have the lowest rate of entrepreneurship in Alabama. We've got the best place to be an entrepreneur and the fewest people doing it. And so that's something obviously that we have to talk about, and that comes into the conversation about what kind of economic impact breweries have on the state of Alabama. So this is what beer means to Alabama. This is a year old, so you'll see I mentioned there was 53 breweries. This was from last year. There were only 41, which makes us the 38th in the state rankings as far as breweries per state. But you can see we actually create a little over 4,000 jobs in the state of Alabama, which represents about $616 million a year in economic impact on the state economy. And actually, this number is outdated. The 2019 figures are already out, and that number is up to about $740 million in economic impact and almost 4,200 employees in the state. So this is really, really profound if you think about the fact that 10 years ago there were zero. 10 years ago in Alabama, there were zero breweries, there were zero jobs, there was $0 in economic impact. So we've come a long, long way in a decade. And it's really driving primarily small communities is where these smaller operations are locating. You know, they've been a great partner with Main Street Alabama program. We've got so many small breweries that were integral in revitalizing small downtown districts throughout Alabama. I mean, from Florence, Muscle Shoals, Huntsville, obviously, Birmingham, segments, entire neighborhoods in Birmingham that were revitalized because of breweries. Avondale Brewery, you know, came in and completely revitalized the entire Avondale community when nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. And of course, Gadsden's no different. When we started our brewery in Gadsden, I think the occupancy rate in our historic downtown was about 42%. And today, I think we have 3 empty buildings in the entire city, downtown historic district. So it's about 98% occupied. I'll stop short of taking credit for that, but we certainly play a role in economic development and revitalization. And this is important too, and I say this, and every time I say this, I always get really funny looks, but I honestly believe that the economic recession of 2008 was the single best thing to happen to small towns in Alabama ever. And the reason I say that is because there were so many people like me. I left Gadsden shortly after the steel plant had closed. You know, my parents had enough money I was part of that last generation of kids that my parents could afford to send me to college, and I was never coming back. You know, I left Gadsden in my rearview mirror, and I didn't have anything to do with it. There was nothing there for me. The steel plant had closed down. Goodyear had laid off a couple of thousand employees. And it was just hemorrhaging residents left and right. And so I left and I went to Auburn, and I left Auburn and I lived in LA for a while and Baton Rouge for a while and then Atlanta. And I was never coming back there, but I would go back every now and then to visit my parents, and I would see this little bit of a spark, you know, but there was just no real youth there. There was no energy. You had this huge age gap in leadership. I think the average age of our city council was 90. I'm not kidding. It really was. I'm not kidding. And so you had this huge generational gap where there were no really young entrepreneurial spirits in the community, and you could tell it was a sleepy town. There wasn't much going on, and I remember I was fortunate. I didn't lose my job in 2008. I chose to start this brewery and work my full-time job at the same time for about a year and a half before I was finally able to quit my job and move over. But so many people did. And what do you do when times get tough? What do you do when you lose your job? You go home. You go home to what's safe. You go home to what you know. So there were so many people who were living in large metropolitan areas like Nashville, Atlanta, New Orleans that lost their jobs, and they went home, and now all of a sudden that shoe store on Broad Street that mom and dad owned doesn't look so bad. You know, I'm gonna get this thing a website, get some e-commerce going. You know, we might can make this shoe store work. So I've seen it in every small town in Alabama, and especially in Gadsden, this influx of entrepreneurs and young professionals who were didn't feel rewarded for whatever reason in the corporate world, and they got tired of wearing a suit and tie like me, and so I always say there's a lot of stuff that doesn't show up on a paycheck, and this is one of them. I get to wear this every day. So yeah, again, you can see kind of the slow and steady progress of breweries opening each year. Alabamians, y'all be proud of this. We only produce 0.6 gallons per 21 age adult, which makes us 49th in consumption per capita. So we're all being good, temperate citizens. But this is just a small example of what it means to Alabama. And now, before I show you that and tell you what it is, I'm going to ask you guys a question, and then I'll let y'all answer or ask some questions. What would you think is the single biggest threat to the beer industry in America right now? Any guesses?
Death of bees.
That's close. It's certainly a big issue for us because our signature product includes wildflower honey. But the answer that I'm looking for is actually the legalization of cannabis. So we now have 19 states in the United States that have some form of legal marijuana. And studies show that in states where marijuana is legal, alcohol consumption goes down by as much as 22%. So that's a very big issue for the brewing industry. As we see more and more communities, states like Alabama that legalized cannabis or CBD, you know, that was another step in that direction, and it's having a profound impact on the brewing industry everywhere, and it's something that's got a lot of breweries really worried. So again, in the spirit of innovation, what we did at Back 40 is we released a CBD beverage. So this is our newest product, Headwater. It is a naturally flavored soda, non-alcoholic soda that is infused with CBD. We'll be shipping this over the next 3 or 4 weeks. It's fresh to the market, so you'll start seeing it popping up on shelves everywhere. And for you guys who are experimenting with CBD as a wellness product, not an alternative lifestyle product. Okay, this is a replacement for pharmaceutical drugs for chronic illnesses and things. For those who are using CBD like that, this is just another way to have that daily delivery, and it tastes pretty good too. So anyway, that is the end of my formal presentation, and I'll be happy to answer some questions about the beer industry in general.
We have,
yes. I'm sorry.
No, it's great, but we have a microphone we pass around you, so people here.
Well, there's somebody in the overflow.
People in overflow, and they can't hear your questions.
If they can't hear the question, all they hear is my response, and they have no idea what your question was. There we go.
How much CBD is really in a can?
10 milligrams is what we do. And, that's a real interesting thing that we're learning about with the CBD industry right now. A lot of people ask, what's the appropriate dose for CBD? And, there's really no dosage. I mean, it's like vitamin B12 or vitamin D. It's, your body's going to absorb what it needs, and it's going to pass through whatever it doesn't need. So the short answer is there's no set dosage, but our cans contain 10 milligrams. Yes, sir.
Are you planning to expand out of state, grow?
When you say expand, you mean, we distribute our product throughout 7 states.
Or
But
breweries.
so one of the unique things we did about a year ago, we built our first satellite brewing location, which is basically a 1/10 scale model of our major production facility in Gadsden. We built that in Birmingham, right across from Sloss Furnace. It's a little around the corner from where all the cool kids are there at Pepper Place, and we always like that. That's kind of the term Back 40. I never really fully explained our name, but Back 40 is an old agricultural term that refers to the 40 acres furthest from the barn, hardest to maintain, hardest to irrigate, where the tractors go to die, out there on the back pad, and all the old rusty cars. But, when I wanted to start Back 40, I was actually sitting in a very important meeting that I didn't have any business being in. It was on the 53rd floor of the GP Center there in Atlanta, and the CEO of GP and a couple of other highly paid executives were in the room, and we had just bought this big facility in North Carolina, and we were going to gut the whole thing and rebuild it. And I was in charge of the team that was going to lay out all the equipment in the new footprint. And I kept making references apparently to how beer flows through a brewery. I said, this product's got to be liquid. It's got to flow through here just like water, And so finally the CEO of Georgia Pacific at the time stopped me in the middle of the meeting. He said, son, how many brewery tours you been on? And I said, well, I don't know, but I know it's over 200. And like I said, at the time, there was only 400 in the country. And he said, well, maybe this is more than a hobby for you. And I said, yes, sir, maybe so. And so I got up to leave that meeting, and he said, do you understand what I was telling you, Jason? And I said, yes, sir, I think so. He said, you're obviously passionate about this. You need to go pursue it. You're young. You've got a window of opportunity where you can go pursue your dream. And if you fall flat on your face, I think you'll still make a pretty good supply chain guy. And so I walked back to my desk, and I picked up the phone, and I called the Alabama ABC board, and I said, I'd like a manufacturing license in the state of Alabama. And he said, we haven't given one of those out since Prohibition. Now, there have been a couple of brew pubs in Alabama, but not a manufacturing packaging licensee. And I said, well, then the application should probably be pretty short. Go ahead and send it over. And so one thing led to another. But my point there is, at the time, everybody saw Alabama as kind of the Back 40 of the beer world. It's, they're all drinking light beer down there. Why bother? They don't, because people have this perception that you live in Alabama because you never got a chance to leave. Like there's this lack of this idea that there's a lack of palate here, or a lack of appreciation for the finer things. And being from Alabama, of course, I always knew so much of our story is told at the dinner table with food and beverage. And if you I know plenty of farmers that will pay $50 for a bone-in, dry-aged ribeye steak. Just don't make them wear a suit and tie to get it. They just want to come in after work, and they'll walk out with a $250 restaurant tab just like that guy in the suit. And so that was important to me. The name Back 40 was all about referencing this idea of, Alabama being kind of the forgotten part of craft beer. And I knew that if we presented it in an unpretentious way, way that it would be accepted in the Deep South, because, I mean, obviously in Alabama, like I said, we're very supportive of our small businesses, and I knew people would come around and embrace it eventually. You just had to make it a non-pretentious product. And of course, the irony of the back 40 that really put the icing on the cake is, if you ever actually clear that soil and run the irrigation, it produces a bigger yield than any other acreage on the farm, because it's never been harvested. That ground is still rich with nutrients that haven't been depleted. So a lot of farmers keep that back 40 in their back pocket. If they have a tough year, they need a little extra money, they can always go plant the back 40, because that'll produce a much better harvest. So that was the bet that we made with the name. And so we've tried to use that as we do start to expand. We don't want to expand everywhere. We want to be in places that nobody else really sees the value or the opportunity in. And so that was a great example in Birmingham. I mean, there were all of these developments that were really excited for us to build a facility there, and we ended up taking an old delivery warehouse across the street from Sloss Furnace, and now they've redeveloped the entire delivery warehouse. It's a big logistics hub, and there's Alabama Outdoor just moved their headquarters in there. There's 4 new companies that have occupied it. It's completely occupied in less than a year. So that's our model. So yes, we do have plans to build some other locations, but you won't see us in a major shopping center development or anything like that. It'll always be kind of off the beaten path a little bit.
There's one up here.
And so we have the RTJ Golf Trail, we have the Quail Trail. When are we going to have the Alabama Beer Trail?
Yeah, so we actually do have a North Alabama Beer Trail. Mobile's starting to change this now, but up until a couple of years ago, I mean, if you hit the Huntsville, Birmingham, Gadsden loop, you hit about 90% of the breweries in Alabama. But now, of course, we've got great operations in Dothan and Tuscaloosa and Auburn, and several coming online now in Mobile over the next year. There's a couple already open. We got some down in Gulf Shores. So they are starting to expand it into a statewide trail. But before, it was just kind of a loop. And you needed, it's something you can knock out with a sober driver in a free afternoon. Yeah.
So, do you have any plans to make a ginger beer? An alcoholic ginger beer?
So I'll tell you an interesting story about ginger beer. Ginger beer's killed a lot of people in America. Ginger beer was actually a result of a lack of access to barley and wheat. So when you had early on in the colonial days in America, when a lot of people don't realize that's why they got off the boat. The original colonizers would actually park their boats offshore and ride these rowboats in every day and do their exploring. And then they would get back on those rowboats at night and sleep on the boat. So for months and months and months at Plymouth Rock, they never got off the boat. The only reason they got off the boat and decided to set up shop is because they ran out of beer rations. And that's no joke. The very first structure ever built in America was a brewery, because they ran out of their beer rations. And you have to understand, Europeans were coming from a place where you couldn't drink the fresh water. There was no such thing as fresh water in Europe. You had to either boil your beer, and it was much easier just to drink alcohol. Because you knew it was sterile and wasn't going to kill you. And so everybody drank alcohol. Even children got alcohol rations, every day. And so when they got to America, they had no idea that they were surrounded by trillions of gallons of fresh spring water that you could bathe in and drink until your heart's content. They were terrified. They didn't know what the water had in it, so they would only drink beer. And when they ran out of beer on the boats, they said, okay, I guess we got to get off and start this thing. And so that's how they built it. But anyway, the ginger beer thing, nowadays, of course, we can do it. But prior to the Indians introducing corn to the colonizers at Plymouth Rock and the Pilgrims, and teaching them their method for producing beer, which the Indians had already been doing for a long time. Even here in Alabama, there's some old Porch Creek beer recipes that date back into the 1600s that have been found in the state, carved on the side of a cave. No kidding. But what it was before they knew that they could use corn and grow corn there, they would run out of stuff, so they would go get tree bark literally bark off of a tree and use that. The only problem is tree bark's also packed full of turpentine. So you drink a lot of turpentine, it'll kill you. So a lot of people died. If any of you have ever heard of the old law in Germany where if you use anything other than the 4 ingredients, they'll hang you. Well, the reason that was is not because they're just snoods about their beer. It's because when there were shortages of raw materials there, people would use stuff like ginger bark and it would kill people. And so they had to pass this law that said if you're using anything other than water, barley, hops, and yeast, you're going to jail. So now, luckily, we have perfected the art of removing turpentine from ginger beer. So yeah, we can do one. Birch beer too, same thing. Birch tree, ginger root, all that had turpentine in it at one point. Now they're all genetically modified, so we can brew with them. So we make a ginger ale every now and then at the brewery. What we like to do is we'll actually, and this is going to come off crazy, but you really got to understand the domestication of the beer world now. I mean, what I love about our Birmingham location is on any given day, you go up there on a Saturday, it's 50-50, adult, child. You know, there's kids outside playing ping pong on our outdoor ping pong tables or throwing cornhole, dogs running around. You know, it's a very family-friendly environment now. We have a full executive restaurant there, world-class food. You know, it's really the domestication of the craft beer. So every other Saturday at our Gadsden location, we actually do little homebrew projects for kids. We'll brew root beers or ginger ales and teach them how, like, kind of get them back there on a little homebrew kit and teach them how to go through the motion. Of course, we've already got the root beer and the ginger ale from last week canned up and ready to go, but there's a lot of little boys that like coming and having a beer with their daddy.
Yeah. Sir, I noticed the back 40 and that your artwork behind it. Is that your logo?
Yeah, this right here?
Yes.
Yes, this is the logo.
Does that tell me what it means?
So again, you kind of, the green hilltop here,
right.
This is kind of the back 40 of the farm. This is the sun and the sky. You know, it's just that acreage. And one of our marketing campaigns now is Find Your Back 40. Back 40 can mean anything to anybody. You know, it's where you go to clear your head. It's where you go to get some peace and quiet and to figure things out. You know, it's where's your back 40? Go find your back 40 wherever it is. And for us, it was always, I grew up in a farm. My grandfather was a hog farmer on Sand Mountain. So for me, my quiet place was always in the back of the farm. You know, I would ride my bicycle out to the back 40, and that's where I would get it all figured out and figure out what I was going to say to that girl to get her to go out with me or whatever.
So the thing is, there's no subliminal message like Amazon A to Z.
Oh no! You don't have any. You don't have any arrows pointing towards the beer aisle or anything. But that's a good idea. I'm going to hold on. I may steal that from you.
I'm sure you have had fend off the big boys. Is that true?
Yeah, sure. We've had multiple acquisition offers over the years from different entities: SAB Miller, Anheuser-Busch, all the big guys. And up until now, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you how we avoided that. You know, it's just for me. Look. We all got in the beer business to make money. Don't get me wrong. You know, profit it matters in this business. So I'm not naive. Everybody's got a number, but they never got close to my number. I was able to always searching for someone in the state that we could partner with. And I don't know if you guys saw this at the beginning, but about a year ago, after about 2 years of courtship, we brought in, I stepped down as CEO of Back 40. I'm still the chairman of the board, but we brought in Mr. Hatton C.V. Smith. Some of you guys may recognize the name Hatton Smith. Prior to being the CEO of Back 40, he was the CEO of Royal Cup Coffee for 38 years. His family founded Royal Cup Coffee in Birmingham. He, as CEO, took them from $16 million a year in revenue to $400 million a year in revenue. So I figured that was a good enough resume for me to hand the keys over. So this is the way we avoided that. We found some private partners within the state, people who love Alabama, and I knew I could trust to keep this brand and keep the culture and the heart of it what it was supposed to be. So we've been together for about 2 years, and I don't think Anheuser-Busch has got a chance at us now.
One more question, please.
Yeah.
The ABC.
You're about to get me in trouble.
They're in Alabama, and I guess they're also in Virginia, do they throw up a lot of roadblocks? It seems like I've heard from people in Virginia they do there.
Yeah, well, keep in mind, I'll try to be brief, but every state in the United States, what happened post-Prohibition was the federal government said, okay, this was a huge disaster. This is obviously a states' rights issue. This is what we should have done to begin with. We should have just let every state handle their own alcohol laws. The federal government shouldn't have been involved. And so what we came up with after that was a system called the three-tier system. So you have manufacturers like me, then you have beer distributors, wholesalers, which is the middle tier of the three-tier system, and then you have retailers, and which is Publix, Walmart, or your local bar or pub that sells beer. Anybody who has an alcohol license to sell beer. So that's the three-tier system. And most states in the U.S. adopted that. They adopted a three-tier system. Alabama is what's called a control state. So what that means is, and this is the director of ABC, Matt Gibson, will tell you this straight up. My objective is to minimize the amount of alcohol consumed in Alabama and maximize the tax revenue that's generated off of it. That is the definition of a control state. Many states in the U.S. are control states. Alabama, over the years, several of them have abandoned that antiquated system to more progressive ways of managing alcohol in the state, but Alabama has not yet made that progression, and so we are still a control state. Virginia is still a control state. So yeah, they're not only in charge of enforcement of the law, roadblocks, checking for underage drinking and all those things, but they also are literally in the business of alcohol. Alabama owns the wholesale tier. They are the only place you can buy liquor in Alabama if you are a licensed retailer is from the ABC board, the state of Alabama. Right down the road over here, they have a massive building with about $1 billion worth of wine and spirits in it. And then, of course, not only are they the second tier, the distributor, they're also the third tier, the retailer. The only place you can buy alcohol in the state of Alabama at retail is at an ABC store. The one exception to that is, of course, we all see package stores from time to time. Well, guess what? Those package stores have to go to an ABC store, pay the same price you would pay for it, and then turn around and mark it up. And the way they make their money, of course, is being open when the ABC store's not open, or, in different times like that. So Alabama is unique. It's one of the only states in the country where we actually are in the alcohol business. While we're one of the only states that openly condemns the consumption of alcohol, but we're in the business.
I've got a question. Alex, in the beginning, said we have a couple of the shirts with your bicentennial toast outside, and we've got the postcards that everyone can take as well. It's a really fine piece of writing. Number
Thank
one,
you.
but I'd really like to hear how that came about, how you ended up coming up with it, and just
so one of the unique things, I met Jay Lamar several years ago, the director of the Bicentennial Commission, and I've been heavily involved in Alabama tourism for almost a decade, and every year we go to Washington, D.C. and meet with all of our U.S. congressional delegates, and we talk about issues affecting tourism in Alabama and how we can regenerate or redirect federal dollars to help support our tourism efforts here. And Jay Lamar was on one of those trips as part of a large delegation that goes, and yes, I wear this even to Congress, even to the Rayburn office building. I'll tell y'all a cool story about John McCain in a minute with my hat. And anyway, so Jay and I were out to dinner with the group one night, and she mentioned that she was heading up, this was 5 years ago, and she said, there were 5 state capitals in Alabama, 4 leading up to the final one here in Montgomery. It would be really cool if you would get together with all the breweries in Alabama and brew a special beer every year to commemorate each state capital in the 5 years leading up to our bicentennial celebration in 2019. And so that's what we did. The Brewers Guild, we got together every year. We brew what we call a collaboration beer, where one brewery brings the hops, one brewery brings the barley, one brewery brings the cans, one brewery brings the yeast, and we all do it together at one location and sell it to raise money for different charitable organizations. So we attached to the Bicentennial program 5 years ago, and so every year we made a beer and named it after each one of the state capitals leading up to this year's Montgomery beer. And so along that journey, Jay, as we started to approach 2019, last year she was going to do a big kickoff at the Alabama Governor's Conference on Tourism. And she emailed me and said, Jason, I can't think of anybody else. I'd like to do a toast to Alabama on her birthday, a birthday toast. Would you consider writing it? And I said, yes, sure, absolutely. And I've always done several things at the Governor's Conference on Tourism. So I flew, it was in Montgomery this year. I flew into town on two wheels like I normally do, an hour late for everything. And I ran into the hotel lobby and I sat down, and Jay walked by and said, Jason, we're so looking forward to that toast you're about to give. And I went, oh no. I had not written anything. So I quite literally, and this is honest to God, the true story, I grabbed a bar mat. I was having a beer at the bar, and I grabbed a napkin and an ink pen and started writing, and I wrote that whole thing in about 10 minutes. And I was bouncing it off of the bartender, and this girl was from Michigan or something. She's like, why are you writing a toast about your state? And I said, how's this sound? So anyway, I wrote it and went in, and it was pretty well received. And now, of course, the Bicentennial's done so many great flattering things with it, from the postcards and the T-shirts and the billboards and all that stuff. So it was fun to write, for sure. And it was from the heart. I mean, you know, I learned a long time ago the key to making a good toast is you talk about someone's accomplishments, maybe mention some adversity they've had to overcome, and end on a good lighthearted note towards the future. And so literally I just thought of Alabama as a person and said, okay, what have you accomplished? And that's how I wrote it. Yeah. All right, thank you. Oh yeah, I will tell you real quick, I'll tell you the story about John McCain. Thank you for reminding me. So I'm in Washington, D.C., walking through the Rayburn office building, or from the Rayburn building over to the Senate side, and I'm in my work boots, blue jeans, and what I call a brewer's shirt, what most of you would probably call a mechanic's shirt with a name tag on it. You know, that's what most brewers wear inside the brewery when they're working. And I had on a hat. And it was red, white, and blue Patagonia hat, actually, because I am patriotic. And so I was walking through, and John McCain walks up to me in the hallway. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm about to get reprimanded by one of the greatest patriots of our generation, you know, about dress code in Congress. And he walked up and he said, son, actually, he said, Jason, would you mind letting me take a picture with you? And I said, well, no, sir, not at all. And the whole time I was thinking, how's he know my name? And I was like, oh, it's on my shirt. Yeah. But anyway, he said, would you mind if I took a picture with you? And I said, no, sir, not at all. And so we got together, and one of his assistants there took the picture of us together. And as she was taking the picture, he leans into my ear and he whispers, he said, son, you got this place figured out. The only people getting more attention than you is the guys from the Texas Cattlemen Association. Because they all walk in with their big cowboy hats on, you know, and he got it. And I want to make it clear, that's the reason I do this when I speak publicly, is because it is to send a message that today's entrepreneur doesn't look like yesterday's entrepreneur. You can't judge a book by its cover. There are tons of really successful people out there that look like me, you know, that are out there working hard every day, that are trying to do the right thing for their community. So it is intentional. I do it to bust that stereotype. And about a year ago, I got suckered into running for public office in Gadsden. So now I'm a city councilman. And yes, I still wear my hat at my city council meetings too. Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it.